You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. So, yeah, it's been kind of crazy, man.
It's been a day.
As you know, yes, because you're part of it too, but right now, the Detroit Jazz Fest is going on this holiday weekend, and I'm kind of in the middle of doing it. We almost didn't have a show today, but fortunately, things worked out for you guys, for us, that we're able to do it today. Now, of course, Monday being Labor Day, it's a holiday. We're going to end up taking that off. So, Monday night, enjoy your friends, enjoy your family. We got plenty to talk about. I think next week, did you get that thing that I sent you about the Acolyte?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe that'll probably be our next Friday topic. We'll see how out of order we're going. We can get that done just like right out the gate. But enough about the Acolyte and all this other stuff and work schedules. We're here to talk about Star Wars. So if you guys remember, when I ended up doing the show solo last week, I talked about some of the things that were going on in the world of Star Wars. And one of the things that I mentioned was the fact that the Bad Batch Season 2 was abruptly taken off of the schedule. And a lot of people were wondering, well, does this mean it's not going to be released in 2022? Did something happen or whatever? But rest assured, the Bad Batch Season 2 is coming out
September 28th.
Yes, the 28th. I keep getting that confused with Andor, but yes, September 28th. Thank you. See, this is why I need a co-host.
Well, yes, for those of you who are wondering, yes, I do have power now, as you can see.
Yes, he has power. Yeah.
It's been a rough couple of days.
Yeah, right? Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's been all kinds of setbacks, but fortunately, at least tonight, I think we could basically muster up enough. You have some power. I can, kind of chill and calm down a bit. And, we could talk about this. So what's interesting to me, though, and again, one of the things that I had talked about when we actually were putting this together, and I put this in the description, is that we wanted to reveal when this thing was actually coming out. But what do you think caused them to abruptly take it off of the schedule and then put it back? Do you think it was just some sort of a oversight, or I mean, I have to admit, for me, first of all, I'm used to Disney dropping the ball on a ton of different things, right? But one of the things that
sadly,
yeah, I mean, it just seemed really strange that when they were announcing the upcoming releases in September that they omitted the Bad Batch, which kind of a big deal. I mean, it's not exactly like it's not like a Lego Star Wars thing or something. And again, no disrespect. Look, I love the Lego Star Wars stuff. Like all the animated Lego Star Wars movies or shorts or whatever, because they've put out a variety of different things. But they've been hilarious. Their holiday special was great. The Halloween special was fantastic. They actually put out something recently that I have not seen yet. I forgot what it was called, but it's on Disney Plus now. But it would be interesting to see that. I'm really looking forward to seeing that. So, but the Bad Batch, I mean, that's one of their flagship animated series right now. So did it surprise you that it was off, or?
Yeah, I mean, it really did surprise me, and it actually kind of had me worried there, because it's actually one of my favorite shows. I really love the dynamic and the story behind the Bad Batch. Is really compelling and really interesting. So I was really hoping. And then the way like season 1 left us, it's like, all right, you ready for season 2? And at first it seemed as if it wasn't going to happen. So I'm really, first of all, relieved and happy that we're actually going to get it, and we're actually getting it the same month as Andor. So that's really cool, because now we kind of have even more Star Wars to kind of watch this month. And then we still even have Tales of the Jedi that's still set to release this fall. So
is it?
That's all good. Yep.
Is there a date on it?
So we're going to get it. I haven't seen the date on it just yet, but that's what that's pretty much what I've read, is that it's still, as of a couple hours ago, it's still set to be released this fall.
Hey, you got to go hour by hour when it comes to Disney, right? I mean,
Exactly.
but here's what's really funny, and again, this is pretty much what I want to bring up, and this is really the crux of the discussion today, is the fact that you pretty much had this thing just disappear off of the schedule. And then it ends up reappearing, but it's not even the normal channels that clarified it. It was Disney Australia that talked about it. And this is why I wonder if this was some sort of an oversight that they just didn't do, or I mean, it just seems really, really strange because, like I said, this was a really important show. And I think where they left off last season, this is one of the shows where usually with Star Wars, it takes a little while to ramp up, right? You have a little bit of conflict or whatever, like in Rebels and Clone Wars, a little bit in the first episode or first season. And then the second season picks up to where it's not quite as, I guess, drastic. But the Bad Batch, when you really look at where it left off, I mean, it's pretty heavy. I mean, for a second season, it's pretty heavy what we're going into, what we can expect, actually.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it is going to be a heavy season because of how things were left at the end of season one. And so, for those of you who have not seen season one, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but it's really good. I know. I know. Almost did a little Pete there, but
yeah.
The thing is, though, is that this particular show, though, like you said, it's a flagship show. It's one of those shows that really kind of pairs well with Andor, honestly, because it's kind of in that same kind of time period where things are starting to change over, and you're starting to see, like, okay, seeds of the rebellion starting to form. Even in Bad Batch, you see Saw Gerrera. Saw Gerrera is going to be in Andor. So there's that continuity there. So that's why I think this is going to be a really cool thing to kind of have both of these shows kind of running more or less simultaneously with each other, because now we're going to actually be able to really kind of see things from a bunch of different perspectives. And that's one of the things you and I often talk about, is watching Star Wars from perspectives now. And, we're going to get perspectives of the everyday people, and then we're going to get perspectives of these soldiers who were once a part of the Republic, as far as clone troopers, and now they're outcast, and now they're kind of starting to see how this new empire is forming and shaping up, and how that's affecting the galaxy overall, and even what their role is in the world. It's just a lot of depth into this.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. I didn't really stop and think about it until, well, you brought it up. But a lot of the Star Wars shows now are based on perspectives. And even when you talk about Tales of the Jedi, that's going to be based on various perspectives, as it features some of the Jedi. I think it takes place during the Clone Wars, or does it time hop? I don't.
Well, the cool thing about this is that, like, the Bad Batch kind of takes place post prequel era, along with Andor, but with Tales of the Jedi, it actually takes place during the prequel era, because it's chronicling the fall of Count Dooku and then the rise of Ahsoka as a Jedi apprentice.
That's what it. Right. That's okay. I couldn't remember exactly pretty much what the foundation of the whole story was, and that's what it was. Yeah. And honestly, I think that that's a really cool perspective too, because Dooku just appears out of nowhere in episode 2, and then he becomes a fairly prominent character, actually, throughout the Clone Wars series. Until, he meets his untimely demise in episode 3. But the point is, during that time period, yeah, right, he's actually really, really important to the story. And not just to the saga part of the story, but I mean, even when you go beyond that. And there's that book that we read, too, that was actually an abandoned Clone Wars script.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, what was that called? It's like
Uh,
Dooku.
what's it called? Yeah, it's called Dooku.
Oh man,
Something.
I don't know why we know.
The
We're
book is funny.
probably
The book is like 7 feet from me. I could just probably just grab it, but
if only you had the Force, right?
right, I could just reach my hand out and
The
call it to
Lost
me.
Jedi. That's what it was called.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and yeah, and the thing is that and I think that's actually might be s- something we might see. Like I don't know if that's going to be part of Tales of the Jedi. And I've always thought his story would be interesting because unlike a lot of people we see turn to the dark side, Dooku was much older, and so I always wonder what his motive was or what was his rationale for like eventually leaving and going over to the Jedi. I mean, leaving the Jedi Order and linking up, and how did that even happen? How did he even get in contact with Sidious? And like how did that happen? Did he manipulate him the same way that he did Anakin, or did he use a different tactic? you know
well,
I'm
I'm
just
sure
really
he used a
curious.
different tactic. He
Hmm.
probably hammered on the fact that the Jedi, and it's something that I think that you would have to use against older Jedi. You would have to say, "Look, I get what you're trying to do. you know, it's
Hmm.
noble and it's cool, but ultimately it's a slow, laborious process that I mean, it's just not going to work. But I really agree with it. I really want to help. I really want to. I mean, in a way, it was probably a spin on what he did with Anakin, but whereas Anakin weakness was he wanted to save everybody, and that's what
Hmm.
Palpatine ultimately preyed upon. The failure of him saving his mother, and then of course, ultimately facing a fate to where he might not save Padme.
Hmm.
And so what I think is that maybe with Dooku though, it's really more look at all this stuff that's happening and you could fix it. You could fix it if you just use this. But I agree. I think that it's really super interesting the story of his fall. Because even in The Lost Jedi, it's sort of like you go back to his childhood when he was younger, when he was coming up. So you understand why
Hmm.
he's a count and his regal, noble background and all this stuff. And they cover a little bit of
Hmm.
it because they actually cover quite a bit of his career as a Jedi. And that's why I agree with you. I think that what they could ultimately do is take the Lost Jedi book, which essentially is written like a television script anyway, because that's where it came
Hmm.
from. It was
Right.
supposed to be a Clone Wars episode, and it was just never produced. But it was a really good story, so everybody thought, okay, we'll just make a book out of this thing. But what was weird was, unlike something like, say, Dark Disciple, which was also based on a Clone Wars episode that was never produced, they didn't revamp it and turn it into a book style, like the whole form of a novel or something like that. It was very much like a television script. So they could just pretty much produce that as a Tales of the Jedi episode, or maybe break it up and expound on the various points. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of stuff, coming up, and that and things that we plan on seeing. And like I said, I just really want to see what's going to be the fate, even on the Bad Batch. Um, they had one of their members kind of decided to just like, no, like it wasn't the chip that made me go bad. I just never agree with any of this stuff. I thought it was stupid anyway. So I mean, just that part.
That was a pretty crazy revelation, actually.
Yeah,
Because
I
up
was just
until
like,
that
whoa.
point, we were all led that, oh, it's the chip. It's the chip. If you just get the chip out, everything will be fine. And when you find out, it's like, no, actually, I just thought this whole thing was dumb and this is who I really am. It's almost like Palpatine in that sense. The Palpatine part was the mask, the Sidious was the real form. And that's what we got in the case of the character that you're talking about, is that what you thought, which really is kind of strange when you go back and you look at season 7 of the Clone Wars, which basically featured this variation of the Bad Batch, because the Bad Batch originally appeared in, I want to say, it was like one of the earlier seasons, like 3 or 4 or something like that. And the concept was the same, but the Bad Batch characters that we were introduced to when they brought them back in season 7 of the Clone Wars was a little bit different, and they were a little bit more defined and quite fascinating that you have these rejected clones, and they're rejected because they ultimately have their own personality and their own skills and everything else. So, and then of course it's how they were pretty much overtaken by the stormtroopers. You know, we no longer need clones anymore. I mean, there's just like all these things that they have to deal with in the Bad Batch. The fact that the Republic has turned into the Empire, but it's the same body of government. It just works a little bit differently. So,
Yeah,
you know,
it's
we have to
definitely, it's
see.
kind of like if almost like a, Chrysler becomes Stellantis now. And it's like it's the same building, same people, just different shirts and new management basically. And just but
Yeah,
the
but it'd be
management is
like if
kind of,
they just, yeah,
they
right.
never change. They just kind of decided to go with a new business model or something like that, and this is what they're doing now.
All right, well, David Sumler Jr. writes, I thought the chips were why the clones were bad. Well, that's it. That's what
Hmm.
that is why. But that's what makes this so interesting. And you have to remember that the Bad Batch were rejected clones, so they weren't quite like the other clones. They were actually considered broken. But what that part of that brokenness was independence. They didn't follow orders, they weren't towing the line and everything else. So the chip that Palpatine developed was actually put in to alter the personality and susceptibility to various orders or commands or whatever for normal clones. But you could, if you have individuality, you could have somebody that's maybe not so nice. And I think that that's what happened with this particular Bad Batch character, is the fact that you find out, like, you know what? This is kind of how I always was. I was just going along with everything. And it was such a wonderful revelation the way that they pulled that off.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what made this whole story unique is because, when you think of a clone of something, of course you think identical, right? But the fact that they one don't look like all the other clones, number one.
Right.
Two, they all have enhanced abilities because of their, I guess, if you want to say their deformity or retardation or however you want to kind of call it, like gave them enhanced abilities. So you have, Hunter, who's exactly what he is. He's a master hunter. Like he almost is like Wolverine from the X-Men in the sense, except for without the rage. He's more, he's very keen, he's very smart, he has all these different heightened senses that he uses to kind of navigate and create plans and strategies. You got Tech, who's like this brilliant mastermind. He's like Q from James Bond. He can whip up about anything, and or Donatello from the Ninja Turtles or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
He's a real techie person who can always has his head in the computer somewhere. And then you have Wrecker, who's pretty much the Brawn. He's just this big, huge, hulking, not the brightest bulb in the in the box, but nonetheless, he has a heart of gold though, and but he's ridiculously strong. Like, I mean, he lives up to his name. Like, he's always ready to just pick up something and launch it and wreck something. So then you got Echo, and now we have Omega, and with Crosshair, this is a character we're talking about. Crosshair is that one that kind of went rogue, and he's an expert marksman. Like he's kind of like if you ever watch the Expendables, he's kind of like Jason Statham character. That's who he reminds me of. Even the way
Mm-hmm.
he talks, it's kind of like it was almost based off of him.
Yeah, actually, that's a good
And
point. I mean, he's
that's who this group reminds me of. It reminds me
yes,
like of a Star Wars version of the Expendables.
they
Even the
very
way
much
Hunter
are.
looks,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like Rambo.
Yep.
That's kind of what he looks like. He's based off of.
I never really thought
So
about it, but that could be what they did base them off of, because, like you said, some of the, if you actually match character for character, you
yeah,
know,
it's kind of like either if you mixed the Expendables and the A Team together, you got the Bad Batch in a way, So
unlike
that's
the A
pretty
Team and Stormtroopers, they can actually hit their mark.
Right.
Just thought I'd throw that out there. Let me get to this. So David follows that up. So they're robots with a conscience?
They're not robots though. They're actual people. Like they're cloned. You don't clone robots. You manufacture them. You clone people. So
today's PBS special.
But yeah, so essentially these guys were just they were, created in the laboratory, and then they were just all of them were inserted with this chip, that basically was supposed to make them very obedient and subservient to whoever was in charge, and they followed orders to the letter without question. And that's pretty much the design of them. But these particular clones didn't pan out that way. And so that's why they call Force 99 or something like that.
Yeah. Clone Force 99.
So Clone Force 99. So yeah, they're kind of, like I said, they're the rejects, quote unquote. But yeah, essentially they're kind of free thinking, independent kind of guys. Almost like mercenaries for hire, pretty much. I mean, that's basically what they kind of turned into.
Well, another good point
that's why I kind of made the thing of the A Team and the Expendables.
Very much so. And I think another thing that a lot of people forget, especially with the whole droid or robot thing, because people thought the original Stormtroopers were actually droids, but they weren't. Then you found out that they were actually people in the armor. But the distinction is the clones their template was Jango Fett. So they took the Jango Fett's DNA and they created this insane clone army. And that's where the clones basically came from. But, like Daryl said, they were bred to be obedient, take orders, be loyal. They pretty much took Jango's DNA, but they altered it in such a way that it would make them pliable enough that you can control them in an army. And that's the reason why Boba Fett was always referred to as the unaltered clone. Because that's what Jango wanted. Jango was like, okay, you give me some money, and then you basically give me my own unaltered clone. Somebody that doesn't have any of this other stuff. And this is not the chip, by the way. The chip that we're talking about was actually put in by Palpatine, and that's what pretty much made it so when he executed Order 66, they would just all turn on their Jedi generals and then basically obey him. It is a little bit of an override, basically. But the original design, if you will, of the clones was to definitely get these guys, take Jango Fett's DNA, and so you're pretty much getting his intelligence, his skill set, all the things that make Jango a great bounty hunter, but with none of the undesirable aspects. At least undesirable as far as trying to control these guys for an army. Because, if you gave these guys an order and they just had Jango's unaltered DNA, they'd be like, no, that's stupid. We're not, we're not going to do this.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's pretty much, how the clone troopers kind of came to be. And then eventually, as we saw towards the end of season 1 of the Bad Batch, they started to realize that they're no longer using clones anymore. They're actually using civilian people and that's where you start to see the difference between clone troopers and stormtroopers. And so this is where that shift is starting to happen right at the end of season 1.
Yeah. And that's the other thing too, is that the whole Bad Batch, which of course it is only a single season, but that's one of the themes that it's definitely going to deal with throughout its run, is that how do the clones feel about this? Because remember, as we said, the Republic was once this is the governing body of the galaxy. And so, at least if you are a part of it. But then when they turned into the Empire and they changed things and they decided, okay, we don't want clones anymore, we want stormtroopers. It's like, well, you got all these clones who once enjoyed this level of respect, level of notoriety, privileges and all this stuff because they were the army, the grand army of the Republic. Well, now they're suddenly looked down upon. And the Empire decided they don't want clones. That's what makes Kylo Ren's comment in, was it The Force Awakens or Last Jedi, when he turned to Hux and he was like, well, maybe we should just get clones then or something.
Oh, yeah.
Which I thought was so awesome because that was one of the references that they made to the prequel era in the sequel trilogy. And, anytime they did that, I just lost my mind. It was kind of like when Luke Skywalker actually uttered Darth Sidious. I mean, my head exploded at that point. But one of the things that I definitely think, though, is that it's going to be interesting to see where they go with this. Because, first of all, we don't even really know how many seasons of The Bad Batch there are going to be. At least I've never read. I don't know. Have you run across it? Okay, you haven't seen anything either? So, yeah, it's kind of like, well, how many seasons are they going to have of this thing? And so it's going to be interesting to see what kind of a story they want to tell, which is why them leaving it off of their roster, especially when it was such a flagship show, it's like, well, wait a second. Well, are you changing your mind? Did you have something else planned? What are you doing? Where are you trying to go with this? And I think that's the fact that it freaks so many fans out just shows you how there's still that mistrust of Disney. There's still that, okay, it could just be a simple mistake or something, or they could just be doing something stupid. Which one is it? We pretty much.
That's the thing is, and I'm glad you brought that up because that's where I was going next with it. It's like, see, this is why the fans are kind of like so leery about Disney and about Star Wars is because, it's just little things like this. And then you got big things like the sequel trilogy that they botched. You just really don't know. There's no type of stability. There's no confidence in like, okay, you can consistently do things and make sure that it comes to pass.
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest things because a lot of times people just point to The Last Jedi or something, and that movie created some fan toxicity because it was interesting. Critics loved it, but fans hated it, or at least they were divided on it. I mean, we'll be fair about this. But ultimately what happens is as time goes on, Solo comes out, and it still had a little bit of blowback from The Last Jedi. People liked it. It just wasn't what they really wanted. And so it began. And it was really only with the animated series and then eventually the live-action television shows that you started to get some of that fandom back. They started to become a little less divided. Now, it has since increased again a little bit with Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan. But still, you get an overwhelming... So the people that hated it don't hate it so toxically or whatever, I don't know. But the people that love it, there's still some various, shades, I guess, of love, right? You get various degrees. Some people just absolutely go insane over it. Other people are like, it was all right. And then you have people in the middle. And then the people that hate it, it either wasn't what they wanted, was they expected, maybe they didn't like the fact that it felt a little too closed in. I mean, Obi-Wan did suffer from a television budget. But the animated shows never really have this problem because they're animated. And that's where Filoni basically started, and that's where he continues to excel. And so I agree that when you factor in that Andor and The Bad Batch in particular are being released at the same time, pretty much, like within a week of each other, or actually a few days of each other.
Yeah, a few days, yeah.
Yeah, they that goes back and forth, and it's really cool. And then when you get Tales of the Jedi, which will give us a little bit more perspective, again, there's that word, then I think that they could have a nice little bubble within the franchise that depending on how they tell the stories, I guess, season to season, because there could be a little bit of push-pull, right? I mean, they might start out really in line, and then depending on where they're going to go as the seasons progress, we don't know. But I can say that it's off to a promising start. We've seen the trailer to Andor. We reacted and reviewed it, so if you guys want to check that out, not now, obviously, but when the video's done, go back and check that out. And while you're at it, check out our review of The Bad Batch. We actually did review the entire first season of that show, so if you want to catch up, because, man, it's September 2nd? Yeah, it's September 2nd.
Right now, yeah.
Yeah, right now at this moment. Yeah, that's a good point. You do the one thing you should never do on YouTube, and that's date stuff. But right now, it's September 2nd. And it's really mind-blowing to think that just within a few weeks, we're going to start getting these shows. And obviously, we're going to review them. And it's going to be a lot. I didn't realize all that was coming out at once. I mean, I think all of our shows at this point are going to be reviews. We might actually have to pick something. Yeah, we might have to pick something and review it not live, just pre-record it and spit it out at various intervals or something. Because otherwise, I mean, the way this is going, we'd almost have to be live every night to cover all the Star Wars stuff now.
But yeah, I mean, that's the cool thing about it. I mean, like, we're getting some cool things, like I said, with Andor. There's going to be a lot of meat on that bone there. There's going to be a lot of meat on this Bad Batch second season. We're going to have more adventures with Omega. That's another character we have really yet to touch on, really, like that. But
that's true.
Omega plays a big pivotal role in the Bad Batch, and I'm really curious to see where they're going to expand and take her character, especially as it pertains to the rest of the crew, because how much further along is it going to pick up exactly where it left off, or we're going to get like maybe a few years or a year or so into it? We don't know. But like I said, she has started to come into her own, and we found out some interesting things about her at the end of season 1 as well. So once again, that's going to really play into, I believe, the second season.
That's true, because you brought up Crosshair and everything in his story arc earlier. And then Omega's, where she's basically a new character that we've never really seen before. And then you have a few characters in the show that have some very interesting story arcs, as you alluded to, that it's really weird to figure out where they're going to go with this show. And honestly, it seems really strange to say this simply because we reviewed the entire first season, but there's certain elements, certain perspectives, I guess that's the theme of tonight's show, that I didn't really think about. Even when we were doing the reviews and we probably said a lot of this stuff, there were certain things that didn't click. Like, I think we did say, oh, there's a lot of things they can do in season 2 or whatever. But when you really stop and think about some of the different characters in there and the arcs that they're either beginning or they're starting to be developed, not even just thinking of season 2, but going on to season 3, hypothetically, of course, because we don't know. But this could be something that this show can go in a multitude of different directions that are really exciting. I'm pretty much looking forward to primarily what you said, the new character that we're introduced to, that we get a couple of revelations. Again, I don't want to spoil anything for anybody that hasn't seen it, especially because I want to be able to review season 2 with you guys. But I think that ultimately with the Bad Batch, though, as a whole, there's a lot of different directions that they can go with this show. And it's really going to be interesting to see where they take this. And that's one of the reasons why I think it left so many fans confused is, nope, just kidding, we're taking it off the schedule. It's like, what are you talking about? This is the one that really ends on a few different cliffhangers, right? I mean, I almost liken it to maybe either season 5 of the Clone Wars or even the final season of the Clone Wars. As far as different directions they could go if they continued.
Yeah, I mean it's really going to be it's going to be a fun ride, I believe. You know, I really believe this whole period of Andor and, like I said, and Bad Batch, because they're happening kind of around the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And they're both dealing kind of with the same problem and issue, just in different ways, in different areas. And once again, the word of the day, different perspectives. And but yet you have key people who may be popping up in each one. So, like I said, we've seen Saw Gerrera already
Yep.
in the Bad Batch. He's also going to be in Andor. We've seen, or maybe we see Mon Mothma in Bad Batch. This season, we don't know. It's a possibility she could show up for episode or two. And there might be some other characters that we kind of find out that, like in the Bad Batch, that might pop up in Andor. Like, hey, they made a live action version of him. All right, cool. You know what I mean? Just little things like that. And I think, like I said, that what Star Wars is trying to do is trying to basically piece this whole puzzle together, and give it more of a tighter knit fit, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, just the next couple of weeks, we got some things that we got to watch. Like I said, it's 12 episodes of Andor that's coming out. First 3 episodes are on the first night, September 21st. Then we have, a couple of days later, season 2 of the Bad Batch. So if you haven't seen season 1, now would be a good time to kind of watch it. So that way you're ready to roll right when season 2 starts, and you'll be all caught up. Yeah. So like I said, there's cool characters. Like I said, the Bad Batch, they have their own individual personalities, so people can kind of pick their favorites and do that. And there's some tenderness. There's some definitely jokes. There's lots of action and all that stuff. So it's really cool.
Yeah, well, and again, hopefully you guys are going to be on board for when we review the Bad Batch season 2. But like Daryl said, there's just so much in that show. It's really one of the better Star Wars shows, period, that have been released, honestly. I remember you felt that way. I remember both of us were talking about it when we saw it. Even in a lot of our reviews, we're like, man, this is some of the best written Star Wars that there's been in a long time. So
Yeah,
hopefully
and
you
this comes
guys...
from Filoni.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
Exactly. So hopefully you guys are on board to watch The Bad Batch. Like Daryl said, look, go back to season 1, watch season 1, then watch our reviews. Then when season 2 comes out, check that out and come right here, and we're going to be right there to discuss it with you guys. So lots of Star Wars in the next few weeks. So again, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. If you guys want to see more content from us, we are live every Monday, every Friday at 8. Except, of course, this is a holiday weekend, and the Jazz Fest isn't going to present itself, so I have to be one of the many minions that are there to help make that happen. So that's going to run through all Labor Day weekend, and plus, it's Labor Day. You guys should all be relaxing, getting your last summer whatever in, because you know what's coming after this. It's going to start getting cold, and you're not going to be able to do anything. So definitely spend time. Well, then again, it depends on where you are, too, because, of course, that comment is really more from us. We're in the Midwest. I mean, if people are in, like, Florida, they're like, what are you talking about? But, hey, there's hurricane season, so, Look, point is, every area's got something. Spend time with your loved ones today. Oh, man, this almost sounds creepy. It's just like you're all going to die. But,
Yes,
yeah,
cryptic.
exactly, very much so. But, yeah, hang out with your friends, hang out with your family. Oh, wait, I got to get this in from David because this is actually pretty funny. He says, how old were you when you turned to the dark side of the Force? I don't know. It's today.
Oh, you definitely were there today.
Yeah, I was there today, without question. But, yeah, so the point is, enjoy your weekend. We'll pick things up against live next Friday. Although, we're going to have to try to figure that out, too, because Cobra Kai comes out next Friday. And it's traditional
Yes,
that
sir.
Daryl and I actually watch it. So it might be a pre-recorded episode. But either way, we're going to be talking about some Acolyte updates. There have finally been some new information, a couple of photos or something. So we're finally going to get a little bit of a glimpse into the Acolyte. So we can't wait to discuss that with you guys as well. So until then, hope you all enjoy your Labor Day weekend if you're in the United States, because we actually do have people from other countries. But, with that, I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.